All right, our next guest, you know and love him from TSN, of course. And on a day like this where there's so much to talk about and so much local stuff to talk about as well, it's a perfect time for Farhan Lalji. And Farhan, we didn't even know that we would be, we booked this before Nathan Rourke got cut. We didn't even know that was going to happen. So now the file got even bigger for today's hit. We hope you've got a couple hours to talk with us.
Absolutely. As long as we're not talking hockey in August, because that's in my contract. We're good, right? I've gotten to, I'm kind of at the point now because I love listening to you and Sakaris. I love listening to JPAT even more, but I feel like, I've got to tone down my content level because you guys are still talking way too much hockey. I know your focus groups demand it.
Yes.
But, you're listening to them. You're not listening to me, as you should. That's a better business model. But I can only handle so much.
We'll probably have to break the rule, but we've got a lot of football content before then. Don't worry. And even football Olympic content, which we didn't see coming years ago as well. But before we get to Rourke and whether or not he's a solution here, what did we watch versus the Elks? How do you describe what you saw there?
Well, if you're a Lions fan, definitely disappointing because it's now the third straight loss, right? And even Rick Campbell admitted after the game that we've lost our way a little bit. And that was pretty evident, And when you look at the Winnipeg game, as bad as it looked offensively, and it was bad offensively, the defense looked very good in that game, in my opinion, right? It was 3-0 late in the first half. And then eventually, things kind of caved in on them because the offense just didn't get anything going. I saw the other side of the field as a problem in this game. I don't think Jake Dolegala was bad, and I'm not a Jake Dolegala guy, right? Like, I don't think he's a great backup, but given what my expectations were going in the game, I knew that they needed to run the football more. I thought they did that effectively. I thought they were relatively committed to it. For the most part, he executed his controlled game plan well. If he doesn't get two key drops from Alex Hollins and Stanley Berryhill, they probably score more points, right? So I think offensively they did as much as you could expect given the quarterback situation. Defensively, they were horrible, like just horrible. And you look at this team 2 years ago, and they were a young team that had slowly come of age, and they were a really good tackling team. They might be the worst tackling team in the league right now. Like, they have regressed in that area in a big, big way. So I think that was disappointing. There was some context around it because you lose your linebackers. I know they lost Beaulieu at safety, but he's only been his second game as a starter. Guys that went back there should be comfortable there. So, I think losing their linebackers hurt them a little bit in the run game. But, when McLeod Bethel-Thompson leaves, you should be able to swarm that run game, and they just couldn't do it. So I think they got a lot to figure out.
It's the CFL. You got to put points on the board and put the ball in the end zone. 16 points over their last two games. A shutout in Winnipeg, obviously not good. You talked about the fact that they did enough. Farhan, one of the real strengths of this football team the last couple of years and this year as well, I think, is supposed to be the receiving core. Like, should it matter who's at quarterback when you have targets like Keon Hatcher, when you've got Alex Hollins, when you've got a guy like Justin McInnes who was getting double-digit receptions not that long ago, and I think he caught 3 passes in yesterday's game. How come they're not using him a little bit more?
Well, look, I think they had a really conservative game plan going into the game, and I think that was the right play, right? Lean a bit more on the run game, controlled high percentage passes. So I know that Hatcher and McInnes, they all haven't kind of found their way together since Hatcher's come back. I'd be more concerned offensively about what happened last week than I am this week, just because of the quarterback, right? They didn't get it going with those guys offensively against Winnipeg, right? And that was a really disappointing effort when they had Vernon Adams, who was healthy for 3.5 quarters of that game. Whereas with this, my expectations were just lower, right? So if you look at Dolegala, and he missed a couple of deep shots to those guys, he doesn't have chemistry with those guys. So, he had some mid-range passes, but he had some drops. He put one into traffic between 3 defenders that Keon Hatcher could have caught, but he dropped. So I think the receiving group will come around when Vernon gets back, because they also got Javon Catoy back in this game. So they should have 4 really good ones once the quarterback is healthy. So at some point you need your defense to help you a little bit, right? And again, in the previous game, I thought the defense did everything they could and the offense let them down. In this game, it was the other way. So the big thing with the CFL is it's a long season, And I got to be honest, like, I'm enjoying this. Not necessarily the Lions struggling, but if you look at the standings right now, it is wide open. Nobody is separated. The top teams have taken a small step back. The bottom feeders have taken a step up. And it should be a riveting second half of the season.
Yeah, after it looked like there was maybe going to be a very distinct line of haves and have-nots, you know, when the Lions were 5-1, if you took a snapshot of the standings there, it looked like there was a definite line. Since then, you're right, it's sort of been turned on its ear, and it looks like it could be the other way around. The question is, do the Lions have the time, the ability to get back onto that track? And my worry is, I guess we have to bring in the Nathan Rourke conversation now. Pretend Nathan Rourke didn't exist. I'd be worried about them rushing Vernon Adams back at this point after what they have seen here. And can they afford not to inquire about Nathan Rourke?
Well, look, I think that inquiring about Nathan Rourke is just prudent management, right? Like, there's no way around that. I believe that if every time Nathan Rourke gets released, 9 general managers' eyebrows raise, their ears perk, right? Like, that's just the way it's got to be. And I don't think the Lions are any different. But at the end of the day, I don't think the Lions are going to be reaching out to Nathan. I think they're going to be waiting for Nathan and his group to reach out back. Nathan knows what the money is. The Lions know what the money is. Nathan's got to make a decision. And, you know, did what happened with Atlanta this week make him reach a tipping point? I don't think so yet. Okay. But, you know, in fairness, I haven't talked to him since that decision. But I don't expect that to create a tipping point yet. I think that there's going to be interest in getting him on a practice roster, and he's going to play that out a little bit longer. But look, they can win a Grey Cup with Vernon Adams. The Montreal Alouettes won a Grey Cup with Cody Fajardo last season. Like, let's be real here. So, like, Vernon Adams can absolutely win a Grey Cup for the BC Lions. So his last 2 games were disappointing. I think that he'll get it figured out, right? And, you know, I haven't talked to VA about this, but I do wonder if the timing of Nathan's 2 releases has anything to do with VA's performance the last 2 games. And you've got to give some credit to those defenses in Calgary and Winnipeg, but that's probably in the back of everybody's mind a little bit, right? So I don't think it's helping the Lions at all right now, just to have that distraction and that conversation around them. But it's a fair conversation.
Do you think VA's distracted by that?
I think he could be. And again, I haven't had that conversation with him.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, could that be part of it? And again, you got to give those defenses some credit. Their game plans were good. And even when VA comes back, let's say he rushes himself back this week, because I don't think the team will, but I know he wants to play against Winnipeg. Let's say that happens. He's not going to be nimble VA. He's going to be Vernon Adams with a brace, and he's not going to be doing the running around. Mm-hmm. So there might still be like 1 game of hiccup before they figure it out. And I do think they'll figure it out. But I do think there's a confluence of events that, you know, might be affecting him on a number of different levels, right? Just like the injury will the first week he comes back. So, but look, I've kind of been on Team VA for a long time. I think he's a good quarterback, and when he's on his game, the league's in a better place. And if you look at his play, like if you look at his statistical play, especially here's the key category for me, because when VA throws picks, everybody's all over him. Prior to those last 2 games, he was lowest in terms of turnover-worthy plays in the league. So he can get on those kinds of runs, and I believe when he comes back, he will again.
Farhan, I understand chasing the dream. Like, I get it for Nathan Rourke, but I also understand he's 26 now. He has been through 4 NFL camps or teams, started with the Jags, the Patriots, the Giants, and brief look by the Falcons the other day before he got caught. Like, how much room is left in the dream for Nathan Rourke, and like how many more NFL opportunities do you think he legitimately gets?
Well, you know, he's now been to 1/8 of the teams in the league, right? So there's 3/8 left, but you know, look, I do think we're coming near the end of a road here. So do I think that the Atlanta thing was the last thing? I don't. I think there will be 1, maybe 2 more at some point this season. And if he sees the writing on the wall at that point, and it's tough because I look at situations around the league and there are so many better places for him to be. I didn't like the decision for him to go to Atlanta. The previous decisions weren't his to make because he got claimed on waivers, right? Yep. Whereas Atlanta was a choice. And I think it was the wrong choice given who they had a quarterback. But for him, I think he felt there was a really good opportunity to get the number 3 spot ahead of Taylor Heineke, who I still think is going to not have that spot. But, you know, there are only so many times where you can kind of, I don't want to say make excuses because I believe in him, but, you know, we talk about the context and we talk about the situation, and you can only do that so many times. because I don't know exactly what happened in Atlanta in a week, because he didn't get any team reps, played in the game. His stat line wasn't good, but there were a lot of drops, which didn't help him. So there was some context to that. But look, this team cut John Paddock to sign Nathan Rourke, and then they cut Nathan Rourke and signed John Paddock, who's nobody, right? So that's an indictment. It really is. And that's not to say I don't believe in Nathan. In my personal opinion, Nathan Rourke is a top 20 quarterback on the planet. I think he's good enough to start in the National Football League, but that doesn't mean he's going to find himself in the right opportunity. So the next one is critical. Don't just take the first thing that comes at you, because there's going to be 4 or 5 teams that say to him, just wait. Let us get through the preseason. Let us see who gets hurt. And there's going to be a thing there where he just wants to get into preseason games because he hasn't played in so long. But I think he'd be wise to be patient and get into a spot where, you know, the guys in front of him are banged up, not proven, all of those things, because he is running out of opportunities. There's no doubt about it. And you just can't keep going down this road.
Given the context of all that you just said there and your belief in Nathan Rourke, like, pro sports is about winning. Bottom line, finding guys that can help you win. So why are politics at play so heavily in the case of a guy like Rourke? And look, go back a decade, we saw it with Casey Printers, who did everything on this side of the border, couldn't get a sniff in the NFL, really. I mean, I know he was with Kansas City, but he never played.
Yeah, I mean, you have these small windows where you've got to hit the right place at the right time. And you look at, you know, even a guy like Taylor Heineke, who was one of those really, you know, lowly regarded players in terms of pedigree and you know what he was doing before he got into the league, and then you just kind of hit the right place at the right time, and he just hasn't had that yet. And I think the hard part for Nathan, and for those of us who believe in his play, is that the guy doesn't even get practice reps, right? And you know, and like, he got very few in Jacksonville, and like none in New York and none in Atlanta. So those were weird situations for him. And you know, like, but then I look around and I go to, you know, I was at the Chargers camp, and Casey Bauman, who's actually Canadian eligibility for the draft, got reps, right? He got like, you know, 10 reps a day in team periods with the Chargers. And he was, you know, a Division II player, just happened to be at a place with coaches with different philosophies and guys in front of him that, you know, that weren't necessarily as established. And then Justin Herbert gets hurt. They bring a 4th guy in, and that guy gets preseason reps, you know? So you go to certain places and guys get these spots, but, you know, you go to Atlanta and they want to do everything they can to invest in Michael Penix. So he's going to get all the reps, and the rest of the guys aren't going to get any. So like, he's been in some unfortunate spots. And again, look, I know it sounds like I'm being an apologist, and I'm not trying to be the Iraqi information minister here, where you just kind of create stuff that doesn't exist. But I do think that place is there, and I think he thinks that place is there, and he just wants to, you know, get into the right place. Like, all of a sudden, I'll give you an example. Like, he was with the Giants, and, you know, like, there's kind of a love in the organization for Tommy DeVito, right? You know, New York guy, all that stuff last year when he played. Well, then all of a sudden, Drew Lock's hurt. Might they circle back, right? Jacksonville, you know, they're not going to, in all likelihood, keep Mac Jones and CJ Beathard. Do they circle back? Like, is there a better place for him to get to where he can just get some practice reps? Because I think if he gets that, I think he'll take advantage. But, you know,
but is a guy like Casey Bowman?
I don't think it's politics. Like, I don't think it's politics.
You don't.
Like, I don't think this is that he's a Canadian Football League player. I don't think that matters, right? When you get
it
there
used
to
to matter,
point,
though,
like,
right?
Once they sign
it used to matter.
To a point, yeah. I mean, I think that, yeah, like, you know, so few people have tried it, right? Like, you've got to go back to Casey Printers in 06, Ricky Ray, I think, in 02, and then Bo Levi Mitchell, who never ultimately signed a contract, but kind of went through the tryout process. You know, people speculate all the time that if he had done more in Canada instead of just a half season, would he have been better served? But when Bo went when he was in 2018, when he was 28, at that time, they're like, well, you're too old now. We're not going to invest in you.
Yeah.
So I get why he went. And I really think that the fact that he's Canadian or played in the CFL, I think those two things have nothing to do with it. You know, like, there are the pedigreed guys and there are the non-pedigreed guys. And there are some non-pedigreed guys that stick around, and Nathan is in the same camp as those guys, right? I mean, you know, look at a place like San Francisco. Brock Purdy's the last pick in the draft, right? He was like 1 pick away from being Nathan Rourke, right? Like, he was the last pick in the draft. But he had a coach that has some serious juice in that organization, right? Like, Kyle Shanahan is as well regarded as any coach in the National Football League. He has the juice to go to the general manager and say, hey, you know that guy that you traded 3 first-round picks for? Well, this guy that was the last pick in the draft is better. And the GM's like, okay. And they make a decision, right? And, you just look at the places that he's been, and just all of those things haven't lined up. And it's unfortunate that we basically need a lunar eclipse for Nathan Rourke for everything to line up at this point. But that's kind of where we're at, right?
Does the NFL need to do a better job and they rarely need to do a better job of anything. I realize that. But, like NFL players don't grow on trees, and you would know more about registration and the numbers of football players in North America. And I would guess if it is growing, it's not by much. To me, if you get a skilled player that happens to have a different, like, that's something you would want to look into, I would think. You're starting to get foreign players. The NBA has welcomed foreign players with open arms. If I'm the NFL, if I got guys with different passports coming into my league, I want that. I'm encouraging NFL. Like, I wonder if there should be an exemption to guys on rosters with foreign passports to foster that, because they haven't really mined the rest of the globe for talent.
Yeah, that's changing very quickly. And the CFL began its global program, and the NFL has done the same. So they've got an international pathways program. They bring guys in for combines. They've required that at least one person in your building, whether it's a practice roster player or an active roster player, be a global, right? There's more and more of that happening. A good friend of mine, Brandon Collier, is a global talent scout, and they're finding guys everywhere to funnel into U.S. colleges. He started in Europe. He's now going to Africa. He's going to Australia. They're going everywhere to find guys. So it's just a matter of time, right? And I think the NFL flag football in the Olympics is going to add to that. But you're right? And I think in Nathan's case, if that's what this is about, it's I think that when it comes to NFL scouting, people want to be known as that scout that was able to unearth the diamond in the rough. Like, think about Giovanni Manu, right? The UBC offensive lineman that went fourth in the fourth round of the Detroit Lions, and the number of scouts that were here. Like, scouts kind of make their careers by finding that guy, and teams will take chances on that guy, just not a quarterback. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you get it wrong with the offensive lineman, everything's fine and you can move on, right? You got a million of those in the building. You get it wrong with the quarterback, someone's going to get fired. So they're less likely to take a chance. You really have to fall into those opportunities. But I'll tell you this, guys, as far as Canadians are concerned, Dave Naylor and I are working on a project called Canada's All 22. And there are 39 guys from Canada that are in NFL camps right now. So we picked the All 22 starting lineup. We have them at every position, not like the old days where they were just O-linemen and kickers. There's now some really good names at receiver, at defensive backs. Like, we've got two safeties that are all pro caliber, right? Like, we've got starters in all these spots. Now, the quarterback thing, we thought we had Nathan Rourke on a roster. Now we don't. So we got to figure out how we're going to manage that one. But every other position, it's happening. It's changing. So, and I think that's a good thing for the sport in this country. And ultimately, I think the CFL stands to benefit, even if they don't have the top layer in their buildings right now. But, that's why people have always said, hey, Nathan, come back, because they want their own enjoyment. For me, as a grassroots football guy and as a builder, I just think that if he makes it in the NFL, there's so much more for the sport to gain, right? By him having that platform and the number of additional kids that would play, and just how good it would make the CFL look like. I'm a believer in the CFL. I love both leagues, but how bad does it look if Nathan can't make it and then wins the MOP in the CFL next year? You know what I mean? Like, that's a bad look. As much as he's entertaining, right? Like, all those detractors would say, well, he couldn't even be a third stringer in the NFL, right? And like, that would be tough to have to listen to. I hope he makes it.
That's right. I hadn't thought about that angle of it. Yeah, it makes the CFL look below third string NFL quarterback, the best
and
player
he's better
in the league.
Than that.
Yeah,
like, he truly is. Like, when we see some of these guys running around on these preseason fields, like, I just look at, I can't. And look, I'm not that guy that thinks every Canadian can play in the NFL, but I've covered NFL camps for, the better part of 20 years. Like, I know what that's supposed to look like. And Nathan Rourke fits the profile. It's all fallen poorly for him. And right now, the next decision is really, really key, because you might not have many decisions left to make.
How much of the Olympics did you consume, and what stood out for you?
Well, like, I'll be honest with you. I didn't consume a ton of it just because of NFL travel and other things that I'd been doing. Kept track of it. I heard Blake Price was a mean breakdancer back in his North Shore days.
It was, yeah. No, that was Winnipeg. It wasn't North Shore.
Winnipeg days, you did that. Truthfully, the relay team, the 4x1. I mean, I love my track and field, and just to see the entire group And just that team coming together, and Andre DeGrasse, after, what was a less than inspiring 100 and 200 meter performance where he couldn't even get into the final. I don't think any of us thought he would medal based on how his results were trending. But, you'd think he could at least find a way to sneak into the final, and he didn't. And he was dealing with the injury but for him to put all of that behind him, and the leg he ran, and really all of it, like the opening leg was fantastic. Aaron Brown was great. But that relay team putting it together, because, you guys know, right? Like, there's so many sports that we kind of pay attention to at just these times. But for me, the Olympics are swimming and track and field, right? Like, those are the signature sports of a Summer Olympic Games. Take all the team sports and put it aside. To get that gold medal in the 4x1 was awesome. On top of what Summer did the first week.
Yeah, those are the two biggest cheers for me as well. Our poll question today: what new sport are you most looking forward to in the 2028 Summer Olympics? And we've put softball, baseball on YouTube because you can put 5 options there, but it's a returning sport, really. It's cricket, squash, lacrosse, and flag football. And so people are, it's Farhan. He's going to say flag football.
No, I'm not. I'm going to say lacrosse.
There you go.
Truly, right? Because I having known some people that have played for Canada and other countries at the Worlds, that sport is also growing globally. And I think it's a great stage for it. And you're right. I mean, I remember going to Athens and covering baseball and softball, right? And so it was there and it went, and it just kind of depends what country you're in as to whether or not that resonates. I remember during that tournament at the old Athens airport, they built a permanent baseball diamond, a permanent softball diamond, and then temporary venues for each sport as well.
Right.
So there were 4 diamonds in there, and like 3 years later, they were covered in moss. And I remember Peter Angelos, the Baltimore Orioles owner, basically funded and put together the Greek baseball team. And there was a senior men's, beer league pitcher from Canada that wound up pitching for Greece in the Olympic Games, right? Just because he had a Greek background. So, I don't think a lot of these sports have an opportunity to stick globally, but I think lacrosse does. Football's nice. It'll be good for marketing, but it's not real football. Like, I'm not that guy. I'm not a flag football guy. Love seeing it, how it's grown in the women's game and how it can help build the audience, but I'm not a flag football guy. But look, New West guy, salmon bellies. I know lacrosse people, so I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Will NFL players want to play, or recently retired NFL? Like, what is it? Where do they get the team even for flag football? I have no idea what the infrastructure is for this.
Well, I mean, look, the sport is growing, so and the NFL is going to take on that infrastructure for how the U.S. Olympic team gets put together. And I know Football Canada is involved for what's happening here in Canada. I know like a guy like Michael O'Connor, Canadian quarterback's really excited about the possibility of kind of keeping his career alive for a few more years so he can get to that opportunity. Yeah, like, will there be some recently retired players that want to do it? Absolutely. And if they're fast enough, they can. But think about it this way, right? A few years ago, the U.S. captain of their national rugby team was a Virginia Commonwealth football player, right? And he eventually transitioned to rugby. And he said, if 10% of the players that came through the U.S. college football system that didn't make it to the NFL transition to rugby, that U.S. rugby would beat the All Blacks and would win the Rugby World Cup. So by extension, if you think of the athletes that come through that just miss out, that stick around, that miss out in 2026 and stick around for 2028, there's going to be just a ton of talent everywhere available to play on that U.S. team. There will be lots, like big names that you will have heard of in college that maybe didn't make it all the way through that do it. But yeah, and there'll probably be a couple of NFL, like recently 1-year retired players that want to come back and do it. I don't think Gronk or Brady will be able to at that point, though.
No, probably not. How much of the Hlinka Gretzky tournament have you been watching?
You saw my tweet.
I didn't actually. I just know you.
Well, first of all, we don't talk hockey in July and August, but there was a tweet from Canada's, I think the gold medal game that showed like maybe 500 people in the arena, and they were only selling the lower bowl. And it was a hockey website that posted it and said, what a brutal crowd. And I thought, that's an awesome crowd. That's what it should look like in August, especially in a city that just had the Stanley Cup final in the late June. Come on. I know it's on TSN. I shouldn't say this, but come on.
Yeah, exactly. Paul Graham on line
friends
one.
Friends and family should be watching, and that's like in person. Everybody can watch on TV. In person, friends and family, are the only people who should be attending that.
So you're not going to comment on like splitting up Hughes and Rourke right now, or a 100-point season for Elias Pettersson? You're not weighing in on
Here's my thing for you on Elias Pettersson. I mentioned this to you and Sakaris. Is Elias Pettersson's Vancouver is like my comparable is Julio Rodriguez in Seattle and Elias Pettersson in Vancouver. Two guys that are elite generational talents, two guys that have had very, very bad seasons, and two guys that are flat out getting paid. And when I say bad since the All-Star break into the playoffs.
I was going to say,
but,
you're talking about last year?
Yeah,
89 points?
Like, listen, hey, look, let's not kid ourselves. And it kills me that I'm even talking about this. But if that last 30 games going into the playoffs carries over into the first month of the season with the weight of that contract, come on, boys. Like, there's going to be for a guy that has a difficult time eliminating the noise, there is going to be immense pressure on that young man. And I'm curious to see if he has the chops to eliminate the noise and, and focus on it. Right. But like, I see what's happening in Seattle with Julio. A guy that got paid, big time talent, home run derby, everything he did for them in previous years. And he was playing really poorly going into the injury, came out of the injury last night with 5 strikeouts and 5 plate appearances. And that guy's dealing with similar levels of pressure, right? So I'm curious to see which one of these guys comes out of it, because it's been a short sample size of poor play for both. But the futures of these franchises depend on those two guys.
Anything else for Mr. Farhan?
No, just that he gets 3 weeks. You get 3 more weeks to enjoy the silence, the cone of silence around hockey.
Yeah.
Labor Day rolls
around. Is it 3? No, it's 5. Like, you know me, I don't do captain skates.
So September 15th, now you're extending it to September 15th?
Training camp will be the day. Like, look, I follow all you guys. So, like, I don't think I'm not keeping up. But my heart will not get back. Like, usually for me, I always say that hockey should be, like, I love hockey, but I love it with a small L, and I only love it 9 months a year. And the first half of September is not one of those, mid-June to mid-September, it should end on every level. So when training camp starts, I'll have to get dragged kicking and screaming, but I will get into it.
Okay.
But, like, I'm doing 2 games first week of the NFL season. I'm in Kansas City for the season opener, San Francisco for the Monday night game. That's where I'll be, and then you can drag me kicking and screaming back into hockey, but I'll get there.
We'll send you personal reports from rookie All-Stars.
There's no Penticton. There's no, there's not,
Well, if you're going to training camp, you're going to Penticton.
No, I'm going to training camp, but usually, like, Patterson regales me with his stuff from the Young Stars tournament. Yeah. Like, please stop.
We'll get you started with the informal skates out at UBC that first
week.
week.
I will not go to captain skates.
Neil Zaman is skating on a third line with...
Exactly. Farhan, it's a battle for that 14th forward spot.
Well, you know what? I'm going to listen to all of it. But, yeah, you know what? You guys had that poll the other day, right? Late last week, who's going to be the 13th forward? What happens to Podkolzin and Patterson with the 5 battles to watch? And, oh, my God, you already put Silovs under the bus. What is wrong with you?
He clarified he wasn't putting any pressure on him. He just said the role was uncertain. Come on. Honestly. Farhan, thank you for
don't think I'm not paying attention.
Seriously,
I read it.
This guy's
I listened to it.
Taking notes and keeping receipts, apparently.
But he doesn't care about it. There you go.
Thanks,
Farhan. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
See you, boys.